Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We're just waiting until 2 to officially start. And now it's 2. Hi. Welcome to the final workshop in our current series of just providing resources to help parents and teachers navigate this time that's going on in the pandemic. Today, we're talking about curbing frustrations during remote learning. My name is Shalika Matthews. My co-host for the day is Dr. Shauna Miller.
Afternoon, everyone.
We're used to doing this in the morning. All right, so the aim for today is really to look at a lot of things surrounding what leads to frustration. So in terms of parenting, we're looking at your parents' approach to parenting, so parenting styles, and how these styles have an effect on children's behavior. We're also going to be looking at factors that increase negative responses in parents and some strategies that we can really utilize to minimize our negative responses and help us navigate the stresses that we're facing. So in terms of parenting styles, right? Research shows that parenting styles have a significant impact on several factors in terms of child development. This includes social skills, academic performance, as well as the frequency of problem behaviors and overall child development. So what parenting styles really look at is a balance of demandingness and responsiveness. So demandingness really looks at the extent to which parents try to control their children or place demands on their children. And responsiveness looks at the degree to which parents are accepting and sensitive to their child's needs and their emotions. So it's providing structure, but being warm and receptive and supportive of your children. So research agrees that there are generally 4 major parenting styles: authoritarian, permissive, uninvolved, and authoritative. So authoritarians have a high level of demandingness with regards to their children. There's not much room here for collaboration or for children to give feedback. So for example, might look like forcing your child to play a sport that they're skilled at, but that they completely hate doing and get no joy out of, because in your approach, you feel that this is best for them and this is what's going to happen. There's no talk back, there's no discussion. Permissive parenting has a high level of responsiveness. So you're very in tune with your child, but you allow so much, too much, right? So there's not a lot of appropriate boundaries, so your kid just gets everything they want. And that might look like allowing your teenager to throw a party without any supervision, or just to do things and say yes, even though it might not be appropriate for them. Uninvolved parenting styles place no demandingness and no responsiveness on children. So a lot of this is not very effective parenting. So it's not to say that you're neglecting your child in terms of providing things for them, but there is a lot of absence to some extent. So it might look like a parent who's a workaholic and not paying any attention to their child. And this is not to say that if you work a lot, you are uninvolved, but some persons who work a lot do not involve themselves. It can also look like you being on the phone all the time and not paying any attention to your child. Now let's look at authoritative. This is the winner in terms of what we really want to do, because it provides a really good balance between responsiveness and demandingness, where parents are attentive to their children and supportive of their needs, but really setting clear and firm boundaries. And if you have attended any of our workshops over the past month and a half, you would have heard repeatedly that structure is very important, routine is very important, and children need it and thrive on it. We all actually need routine and structure to thrive on, which is what makes this pandemic a little bit difficult for a lot of people because structure has been shifted significantly. So in authoritative, a good example is if your child really doesn't do well in math, but they hate extra lessons, and you listen to them and recognize their feelings and validate their feelings, but you send them to extra lessons anyway because they're not good at math and they need the help. So let's look at the impact of parenting styles. In terms of authoritarian, a lot of research has shown that there are lower levels of academic performance, lower self-esteem, poorer social skills, and an increased risk for mental illness, drug use, and delinquency. Now, in terms of this, it really looks like a platform in which children don't get the opportunity to develop their independence. They don't get the opportunity to figure out who they are and to explore that, because a lot of emphasis with this approach is placed on obedience. And obedience does not result in development of personal responsibility or children who are very good at self-advocating because they just do what they're told. Now, in terms of academics, especially as it relates to remote learning, if you're very authoritarian, the shift might occur where your children are so focused on doing for you that they're not focused on learning. So they just don't want to upset you, they don't want to fail, and they're so preoccupied with this emotional response that it's interfering with the learning process. Additionally, if you're very authoritarian, it can affect whether or not your child has good self-esteem, because depending on how you respond to your child when things don't go the way you want it to go, it can really harm how they think of themselves, how they view themselves. In terms of permissive parenting, these kids usually have poor social skills and problematic relationships. They're more impulsive because they're so used to getting everything they want. It's hard to interact in a world where you don't get everything you want. And it's when other persons have boundaries and put forth those boundaries for them, they are often in for a shock because they're not used to it. So it's very important in terms of developing social skills for kids to know what no means and for them to respect that. So some kids with uninvolved parents have higher levels of delinquency and impulsivity, higher risk of drug use, just because they don't have that support or structure there at all. So they're left to navigate the world and learn the world on their own. Whereas authoritative, which like we're saying is gold standard right now, is having higher levels of academic achievement. It promotes the development of self-esteem, some good social skills, and reduced risk for delinquency. Now, this just means that your kid is getting what they need in terms of the structure, and because they're getting what they need in terms of structure and support, they're better able to thrive and develop. Now, a caveat to all of this is not to say that these outcomes are absolute. Different children have different strengths and weaknesses and respond in different situations, and they can thrive even in conditions that are not ideal. But research does show that the likelihood of having more significant challenges exists when the approach of our parents are not the best in terms of supporting us, both in terms of structure and in terms of emotions. Now, let's look at the factors that can affect parent frustrations. Today, we really want to focus in on three. One being unrealistic expectations, two, assumption of intent, and three, a lack of adequate support. Now, in terms of unrealistic expectations, this has a lot to do with us deciding how things should go. And we all have been, I'm going to say this as a blanket statement, we all have been guilty of having expectations that don't really fit a situation. Maybe we expect too much of somebody, maybe we expect too little of somebody. But how that affects a situation when you are the adult in it or the authority in it is that persons may often end up feeling like they're failing you because they're not able to meet your standard. And it is very crucial that we have a good understanding of our child's strengths and weaknesses, likes and dislikes, both academic and social, so that we can really develop a good benchmark of what is realistic for our children, because all kids are different. And they have, so for instance, if your child is a slow learner and in this period of remote learning, where we're far more involved as parents and far more present, it's bringing to light a lot of things that we may not know about our child in terms of how they work, the pace that they work at, what type of situations they thrive in. So some kids are really good with online learning. It's not an issue. And some kids really needed that school interaction and they don't have it. So it's affecting how they're performing. It's affecting how they're interacting in a school environment, right? So we really want to know our strengths and weaknesses, their strengths and weaknesses, as well as ours, to be perfectly honest, to really develop some realistic expectation. It allows us to strategize what things need to be put in place to ensure that our child is able to meet their potential and reduce opportunities for you to become frustrated with them and for them to be less frustrated with whatever tasks are being placed on them, right? In terms of working with unrealistic expectations as well. As a clinician, myself and Dr. Miller have been doing assessments and kids are not quite performing how parents want them to, or they're not responding. And depending on your approach, so we've had many authoritarian parents, and depending on their approach, it really just leads to the child shutting down and not being as responsive because they don't know how to deal with that in that situation, right? And sometimes as people, we get embarrassed when our kids don't meet our expectations or when they're not doing well. And it's only human to want your kids to do well and view them as a reflection on you, but they are individuals. So we have to take ourselves out of it a little bit and figure out what is acceptable for them. Important to expectations as well is what is typical for your child's age. So should they really be expected to do the things that you're expecting them to do if they're not developmentally at that level? So assumption of intent. Now, this really has to do with what we think is going on when our children do something or when other people do something. So we see something and we say, it's because this. So your child didn't do what you asked them to do. Say, him just don't listen to me, or I'm hard ears, or I'm stubborn, or something like that, where it could be a situation where they didn't hear you in the first place. So they couldn't have followed through with a request that you made. So essentially, it's just the goal of this is really to keep an open mind and not to assume that we know why something has happened without asking why it's happened, without having that real open communication and dialogue to figure out what your child's intentions are. With older kids like preteen to teens, it's very important to start that dialogue and to have that openness because it really facilitates and nurtures and encourages having a good relationship with your child to the point where they are able and more willing to talk to you about what's going on. Because we've all seen at least a TV show, and if not a TV show, definitely in real life, where people will say something to their child and their child's like, that's not it, right? And then you say, okay, what is it? And they don't answer you because nobody wants to answer anybody that come at them like, what is it? So it really is important that there's no judgment in a situation where you're asking for clarity and you want to have an open mind by navigating your own frustration so that you're able to solve problems that arise, right? So it's not essentially removing the assumption of intent is not having any preconceived notions about why your child is doing something. And for younger kids, sometimes they don't have the language to explain why they're doing stuff. So you have to observe them and pay attention, but sometimes it pays to have an impartial person observing, to ask a friend or somebody you really trust to look at a situation with you so that you get another perspective, because sometimes we get real entrenched in what we're thinking and what we believe that we're unable to see things from other perspectives. So a lack of adequate support. Right, so a lack of adequate support, sorry about that. Right here is really, really important in this time of pandemic, because a lot of people have been tested, persons in single parent households, persons who have double parent households, persons with support from extended family have all been tested because it's just so new and there's so much to handle as a parent, right? So in terms of remote assessment increasing the demands on parents, we really want to make sure that we're putting in place contingencies, we're putting in place plans, routines to establish support for ourselves so that we're able to do things in a manageable way. So the demands of online learning require that we do things like packing lunches anyway so that we don't have to cook in the middle of the day, or planning things with a little bit more room for time to allow us if something does go wrong. Because I don't know about you, but me, myself, and everybody I know has challenges when things consistently are off track. So if you plan to do something and it doesn't work out, it can sometimes make you more irritable for everything else that's coming, and you're responding out of that frustration or irritation and not anything else that has happened, which can only magnify negative situations and make it far more worse. So we have to build in supports that are not only people, but are also in terms of practical things that are in our surroundings and in our lives that help us to just make the day a little bit easier and a little bit more manageable. Okay, so responses to frustration. Sometimes we get angry, sometimes we shout, sometimes we walk away, sometimes our face does stuff, sometimes we feel the tension in our bodies. And I want you guys to go ahead and put in the chat how you deal with frustration. So what does it look like to you? How does it feel to you? How do you know when you're starting to lose it, right? So the outward signs and actions that we often communicate to our kids can end up being more harmful sometimes in terms of their confidence, especially when we're talking about the classroom setting. So if you look disappointed or you look frustrated that they're working on something and they're not getting it, then it can really affect how they proceed. So are they going to persevere if your face look like, I'm so tired, I can't bother with this? Or if you have like a smile on your face, like, yeah, man, that's very encouraging to say, even though it's hard, keep going, I'm with you, right? So, and right now, sometimes children can become more focused on not messing up and not making you as parents upset that they are so anxious about the whole situation, and they get distracted from the learning process. As I said earlier, I've had a child cry tears because her parent was approaching her in a very aggressive manner. I carry you here to do this and you're not doing the things, and just all that. And it's the parents' frustration that the process isn't going how they'd want it to go, but it's not the best way to handle it, right? Because quite often we have to remember it's not about us, and our children are having their own experiences, and it's our job to help them navigate that and handle our own stuff while we're helping them navigate that. So if you look at the cycle that's here, it looks like, so behavior comes first, and then you get frustrated by whatever behavior it is. And depending on how we display our frustrations, it can result in a reduction in our child's engagement in this activity. So if we're looking at school, something happens in class that you're not okay with, and you get frustrated, and you respond in that frustration, and your child kind of checks out in some way. And then that makes you even more frustrated, because here you are trying to get the school process to happen, trying to get them to learn, and they're acting a fool, or they're not doing what they're supposed to do, or they're not getting it, and you don't understand how they're not getting it. So it can be very, very frustrating, and it can end up placing you in a cycle where the things that you're doing to help them, get better or propel them forward is really just entrenching them in a poor response to you, because it's not appropriate, it's not the best way to do it, and it doesn't work for your specific child. So because of all of this, and because we don't want to get into this cycle where we're not meeting our goals, we're not helping our kids in the best way, we have to figure out how to deal with this frustration and how to deal with it well. So dealing with frustration, the first thing we have got to know is to understand our triggers. Now, this is identifying what behaviors your child engages in that really bother you. So, and this goes for everybody. These strategies can be used in every relationship in your life as it relates to frustration or in any situation in your life. So you gotta know what ticks you off and understand those triggers. One, so that you can avoid them if possible, and two, so that you can address them quickly or prepare yourself to deal with them if you know you're going to encounter these things that are really just that grate you and annoy you. And then you have to recognize when you're losing control. So you want to know how that looks in terms of, do you get tense, like I was saying earlier, right? And sometimes, do you shout? Does your face start to do a thing before you really go off? So sometimes you show disappointment, like Shakira said, in terms of when you're just not, when you're frustrated and you're in the situation. And sometimes you do things that, I heard this from a psychologist once, and it says sometimes we do things that violate our own integrity. And that just means that sometimes we do things that we feel really bad about in a situation when emotions are high. And sometimes you just feel so bad about it, like you wish you didn't do anything, but you didn't know how to respond better in that situation. And recognizing when you're about to lose control is really helpful in terms of helping you to not violate that integrity and not do things that you regret. So when you can recognize when you're going to lose control, you can engage your coping skills. And you can go ahead and drop in the chat what your coping skills are for when you get frustrated. And we're going to have a discussion section on all of these, right? So when you know what to do, if for me it's deep breathing, it works every time. For some persons it's journaling, it's going for a walk, it's just doing something to really get rid of this intense emotion, because it's not going to fade away. If you're angry, and it's not just going to go away because you breathe. But sometimes it can release that need to shout, that need to say something right now, that need to act in a way that is not the way you would prefer to act. So when you can engage those coping skills, you can keep calm and you can remain in control. And this is very important as well, because our kids model our behavior. You will hear it time and time again that modeling is what we do as parents, because it is. Kids see how we respond to frustration, how we respond to situations, and they often emulate it. So if you don't want your child to behave how you do in these situations, you have to show them what to do instead, because telling them is insufficient. We all wish that we could really say, do as I say and not as I do, and have it work, but it doesn't work, right? And then you want to respond positively. So you want to engage your child in ways that are encouraging, that help them to reach their goals, accomplish the goals, reach the targets you set for them, even though you're frustrated, even though the situation is not going how you would like it to go. So in the moment, what we can do is, one, don't take it personally. No, this is really important to remember that it's not about you. Quite often when our kids are responding, they're responding to something that's bothering them, and it's not personally directed at you, but you're getting the brunt of it. So when we don't take things personally, when we understand that our kids are most often just doing the best they can with what they have, the resources they have, and how they know how to deal with it, then we can get through the moment. It's not to say that you don't get upset at what they're directing to you, or you don't feel bad if they do something that hurts you, but when you don't take it on as if it's a personal affront to you, then you're better able to stay in control of a situation. And we have to stay in control of a situation, or it can go completely off the rails, and we end up having to deal with more problems than just the one we started with. Giving kids a warning also helps a lot. I know many parents have, they have a look, or they have a word, or they have something that they say that lets their kids know, that it's about to be my breaking point, and you don't want us to get there. So almost every parent has that. What's important here is that you're more aware of when you're getting to the point, so that you can give the warning. If you don't know when you're about to lose it, or how you feel when you're about to lose it, you can't give a warning because you just didn't know it was coming. Timeouts are next, and timeouts are not for your kids. In this situation, they're for you. It's that moment where you say, I need to be out of this situation. So in this type of experience, you respond appropriately, like, you know what? I soon talk to you. And then you go to the other room, you punch a pillow, you're yelling at pillow, you scream silently because you don't want your kids to hear it. You send a text message to your friend and rant. I wouldn't suggest a voice note just because your kid might hear it, and the reason you left the room is so that they wouldn't hear the rant in the first place, right? So you can do all of these things just to get it out, right? Because sometimes we just want to shake something or hit something, and you have to get this intense burst of emotion and frustration out before you can deal with something calmly. So that's what that timeout release strategy combination is right there. So next we want to talk about limiting triggers. One, you have to manage your expectations, right? Because if you don't manage your expectations, then people end up disappointing you. And when we're disappointed, we can react in multiple ways. But also when our children disappoint us or don't meet our expectations, especially if it has something to do with school, then we become very concerned and we become upset because we want our kids to thrive and to succeed, especially academically, so that they can be better off for the future. And when they're not able to get it, it's very frustrating. So one thing in terms of limiting triggers is knowing your children's capabilities. And it's not as easy as it sounds to know everything that's going on with your kids. Some kids have more significant challenges that are not clearly obvious, that they need an assessment. So you can come to the care center for an assessment or have an assessment done elsewhere just to figure out exactly what's going on with them, or have more dialogue with the teachers and figure out if what you're asking of your child in the way that you're asking of it, in the way that you're asking it is appropriate or is doable. Sometimes we have to be a little bit more flexible because our kids can meet our expectations, but not in the way that we want them to. So maybe your child needs to sit on the floor sometimes and move about sometimes, and you have to have a dialogue with the teacher that, they really can't sit in the chair, but they can be in the vicinity and they can hear you, they have a headset, and they're able to participate in the class. So it's really just figuring out what works best and being able to let go a little bit of what you think it should be. We also want to communicate our expectations. Kids can't try to hit our targets if we don't tell them our targets. Sometimes we just expect them to know that, kids are supposed to perform good in school. They're supposed to do this, they're supposed to do that. And sometimes we really have to tell them. It's what you do when you take your child to the supermarket the first time and you tell them don't touch nothing, not buying anything, or not buying more than one thing, so you can't ask for this one thing. So it's just telling them what to expect when they get into a situation, so that they're able to, one, go along with that, but also to share with you that, whether or not it doesn't work for them. And that open dialogue helps you to facilitate a much more peaceful academic process, a much more efficient and effective academic process when your kid is able to communicate with you that these things really don't work for me and I'm having trouble, because they don't feel like you're imposing expectations on them, but they feel like it's a collaborative process. So decision making should be collaborative as well, where kids are able to say to you, I want to do this, and you can support that or not, but you discuss, why you can't support it or why you will support it. Also, giving children power in the decision-making process improves their engagement. And when kids are engaged in that process, they're more likely to comply with things. So when we talk about things like behavior modification with rules and structure, kids should always have a say, what the consequences should be if they don't do anything, or why they don't like something, or what they want to choose between, so that they know to have a voice. And this not only helps in terms of limiting your frustration, but it helps them to figure out what they want and how to make decisions and how to become adults who self-advocate, who speak up, and who are able to communicate in the classroom setting that they don't understand something, that they want to do X, how to work in a team. So it spans everything right here in terms of parenting, in terms of child development. being proactive. I talked about this a little bit when I was looking at lack of support. And being proactive means that you're planning out the week, you're planning out the month as best as possible in this situation or any situation, to have contingencies in place if something don't work out, to have a backup plan, to give yourself an extra half an hour to get to somewhere that you have an appointment for, to just over budget for time and over budget for things that can go wrong, so that if you have all these fail safe in place, you feel in control. You know that if this don't go that way, I have another plan that I can pull for, and you don't end up feeling lost in the wind and have to start from scratch doing things when you're doing things in a space where things are not going according to plan, and then there are deadlines for you to hit and things for you to do, because life hasn't stopped because of a pandemic, and like school hasn't stopped, so you have to juggle all these balls. And it's much easier to juggle when you know that if you drop a ball, then there's a cushion underneath to catch it. That's it for the topics we're talking about today, but we're going to shift over to the chat right now so that I can see what you're saying, and you can switch off your mic, ask any questions you have. So go ahead. I welcome the discussion right now. All right, so persons were saying that, okay, go ahead. All right, go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Wait, I'm not hearing you clearly.
I can set the mic. Okay, the mic is on. Good afternoon. Can you hear me clearly now?
Yes.
Okay, well, my daughter, she is going to be 14, but be 14 next week. She's 13 now, but her learning ability is like a 1-year-old child. I asked the school to get help with me to bring her over Michael for them assessor or something like that. To make me know if she have something bother her or what, because she keep on repeating doing the same stuff over and over and over.
All right, so first of all, I want every parent to know here that you can come and get an assessment on your own. You don't have to wait on the school to refer you. There is a form that we give you that form and they will fill it out if you take it to them. You don't have to wait on them. It's entire, and even if they don't want to fill out the form, come to us anyway, and we can do the assessment to figure out what's going on, if there's a consistent challenge that you're having with your child that they're not able to work through. So in terms of, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, but in terms of your child, I would really suggest that you bring them in terms of, you fill out the form in terms of what we have here to start the assessment process, so that we can see if your child needs to be in a special school or if there's something else going on to really help them meet their potential. Right, so persons are giving their strategies, and I really like that a lot of persons really vent and they say they're okay afterwards, or they distract themselves. A lot of these things work, but what is really important in this part is that we broaden the space between when we get frustrated and when we respond, so that we can think of how to respond, so that we don't do something and then go away, calm down, and then come back. So we just really want to, as long as you're making sure that when you're responding in a supportive way, in as non-judgmental way as possible, and not lashing out or not shouting as much as you can, to really help, to really not make the situation worse. But also give yourself a break if you do shout, because we're all humans and sometimes things gonna slip, and sometimes the situation is just too much at that point, which is why we try to build the coping resources and try to make sure that everything that we're going through is managed as best as possible, so we don't get in a situation where we're not able to handle what's going on, or where we end up lashing out. Anybody else? All right. Someone said that their weakness is getting angry and then sometimes shouting. We all get angry. Trust. We all get angry. And that's always going to be what happens. But when you do get angry, it's just how you deal with the anger that's really important. So Farah, your hand is raised. You can go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. Hi, everybody. I was wondering, you see, to get the children tested, they have to go to Michael Way in Kingston. Is there any other options that Michael could maybe decide on? Because, for example, we live way in Clarendon, and most of our parents that we would refer to, they are from low socioeconomic backgrounds and they cannot afford the traveling, let alone the fee to get their children tested. Is there any
Okay.
option?
All right. We have a site in St. Anne that's fully operational right now that they can go to. We have a site in Mandeville. Right now, we're not testing in Mandeville because of COVID, but we're working very hard at the center to figure out how to get testing back up and running because we know that the demand is there and we're trying to just figure out the best way that's safe for the kids and safe for us. So, and we're looking to roll that out very shortly. So we're just taking our time and doing our due diligence on that. But in terms of not coming to Kingston, the closest branch that you can go to right now is in our St. Anne branch, and you can email us and we can give you more details on that to get contact information for them in terms of registering. If you have registration, parents to register, you can just download the forms from online, or we have pre-prepared packages, but those are in Kingston. So the easiest way would probably be to download them, print them, and get them filled out.
Thanks.
All right. Anyone else? I think someone raised their hand. Kalia, you have your hand raised. You can go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, I would like to find out when with the students, the ones who have already signed up, because my daughter was signed up from in February, and I got the messages. When the messages came in, it was about the parenting workshop. So when is it will the children be assessed?
Okay, like I was saying, we are in the process right now of sorting out a testing format, because to test we interact very closely with children, and what we're trying to figure out is a safe way to keep that 6 feet distance that is recommended while getting an accurate test. Yes. So as soon as that is sorted out, we're going to resume testing. Testing will go according to registration. So I'm not sure where you are in the registration process, but we're working very hard to ensure that we're back and running so that parents do get the information that they need and the help that they need in terms of addressing needs that they're facing right now.
Okay, and we'll get a message at that point to let us know, right?
Yes, you will be called at that point in time, yes.
Okay.
All right. Sure. Okay, go ahead. Sharice, you raised your hand.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My child was assessed in the summer. He went through all the tests, but I have not received the results. I was told that I would get a call, but I'm yet to receive the call. What should I do?
All right. Have you called and inquired about it?
I have not.
Okay. As far as I know, all completed assessments have been disseminated already to parents. So I'm not sure why you haven't received a call. What you can do is call here and then just ask for the records department to check the status of that, because I've been told that we've completely disseminated all assessments that have been complete at this point. So you can just double check on that. I don't know if it was mailed out and you just weren't made aware of it by, in an accident, or maybe, I'm not sure if his whole assessment process is complete. Maybe there's a part outstanding, which is why you haven't gotten the report as yet, but you can call the office and find out some more information on that, because I can't speak to that directly right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so in terms of children refusing to go to online school, that requires a lot more in terms of finding out what the challenge is from him in a way where he's willing to give you a more collaborative way, not a, because that can be a very frustrating process for your child to say, I'm just not doing online schooling. But it's very important that, you have a conversation to figure out why he's not going to online schooling, and let him know the importance of attending the classes, because it is school. So if he was going to go in person, then it's not the same, but it's comparative to what needs to happen at this point or at this juncture. Dr. Miller, any feedback on that one?
Sorry, I missed the question because the internet chipped out for a second down here.
So if your child, refuses to attend classes.
No, it can be tricky. So I think, as Shalika said, I think if you think back to what she said earlier about the balance between demandingness and responsiveness, so some of it is sort of trying to figure out what's going on, what is the difficulty, how can I support you? And it can be hard to figure out why a child is refusing to do a task, because it can be partially, we might assume, right? We might assume it's just laziness, or I'm just whatever, but there could be like an actual reason, like maybe they're having a hard time seeing, maybe they have a hard time sitting still. So trying to find out the reason is part of the responsiveness part of parenting. But at the same time, there's also the part that is that needs to set firm boundaries so that he has to go to school and that's not an option. And as a parent, you kind of have to say, this is something that has to occur. There are two hands that are up.
Do you have another statement, or was that from before? I think that's from before. All right, Treviso, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Awesome presentation. Thank you for the information, and looking forward to getting a copy of the presentation. I just wanted to ask, I don't know if I missed it at any point, but is there, I'm sorry about that. Is there, my challenge, I have a 14-year-old, and sometimes when I have to go to work, the challenges I have is, how do you know that you're actually staying online
Doing
in
work.
classes? And is there tools that you can use? Like, I know there might be apps online that you can install on the devices to kind of check on them, or to limit certain access to certain programs, etc. But can you share some recommendations on that?
I don't know any off the top of my head. I'm not sure. Oh, go ahead, Shalika.
No, I was saying that I also don't know any apps off the top of my head, but it's also very important that you work on a system where you trust your child, because if your child thinks that, you don't trust them to comply, it kind of undermines them. So they may, engage in a way that's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy and don't do it anyway. What you can have, though, is a system with the teacher where you check in to make sure that, he attended, something like that, or because sessions are recorded, or they should be recorded and able to access, you can look at what the session included, and then, just help him revise, because in this situation, kids may need a lot more support anyway. So in terms of helping him revise the content, you may be able to realize whether or not he was there for the content. And that may be a good workaround way that doesn't really undermine and present you as questioning whether or not he did attend and he or she attended and did what was required of them at that time.
Yeah, that's a valid point because it has come up in the past where he's saying, but mommy, I went on, or mommy, I did the assignment, etc. But because sometimes I've caught him like going on to Netflix and he would say that, oh, I don't have any class now, and I'm saying, but even if you don't have a live set on, you still have to do work in that time because at the end of the day, it's school. While you're home, you're still at
Yeah.
school. So there's always that challenge of just making them remember that, listen, school time.
That's fair, but I want you to also remember that when they had a break at school, they would be talking with their friends and chilling, but they're at home, so there's no talking with your friends and chilling. So the substitute is Netflix or like a video or something like that. Maybe not Netflix because it can suck up time if you're not really paying attention to it. But if he watches like a YouTube video on something he enjoys, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because it's still, the break portion is supposed to be a break where they get a little bit of time to de-stress. So just think about yourself. If you're in a Zoom meeting all day, but you have other work on your desk, you might want a break before you go back to doing the other work. So it's fair for him to want a break. You just have to figure out what's a good break to take, and maybe not Netflix, but a YouTube video or a game for a certain amount of time is okay. Jameer, you can go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I was a bit late. My name is Jennifer Clark. I'm Jameer Jones's mommy.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to the receiving the presentation so I can follow through. But based on what I've been picking up, what I experienced with Jameer is that he's lazy. My problem is that he's lazy. Online has brought out the laziness in him. So he would be online in his class, bed. I have to be that big stick. Get up, look serious. Da 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 da.
All right, I have a question before you continue. Is it a situation where he's not serious in class, or it just doesn't look how you would prefer it to look with him sitting at a table and like being very structured? Because if he's focusing while lying down and he's attending, that's fine, unless his school raised a particular concern that he can't do that at all. Then maybe it's okay that he does that. Maybe it's okay that it doesn't look the way that you want it to look, as long as he's actually focusing and learning at the same time. Are you still with us, Jennifer? All right, I think maybe we lost Jennifer. Just to round out that point, I'll say when I talked about being flexible earlier, it has to do with things like this. If your child is able to focus and attend by sitting on the floor, or sitting in bed, or lying down in bed, and the school has raised no significant problems with it, and they're performing and they're able to learn and they're able to tell you what was in the content, then it's okay that they do it in a way that's not, sitting up right in a table, because it's still working for them. And in this situation where it's very different, it's okay to give a leeway as long as things are working. Shamia, you can go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
currently having a little problem with my daughter. She's 6 years old, going on 7, and she's pretty negative about learning. She wants to learn what she wants to learn. An example, she can't read fluently, and when I said to her, reading is good because I don't want you to see a bottle and it's poison, and because you can't read, you drink the substance. She's like, reading is stupid, and she don't see why she have to read, and reading can't get her anywhere. But she know that she must make YouTube videos to make money, and she don't have to go to school for that. And she's a smart girl, she loves math, she's very good in math, but when it comes to the language arts and the reading, she make a mountain out of it, and she will cry I water. I can't get her to read.
Okay, so I would suggest play up that YouTube thing, because the thing about YouTube is that you do have to read a lot of their agreements if you're going to, make money off of YouTube. You do have to do research. You do have to study to do the things that YouTubers do. So I'd say play the angle that, I think you can be a YouTuber too, but there's certain things we have to know to be a YouTuber. And then just find things to read for her that are her interest areas and make it a little bit more fun. Because sometimes when we say, you have to do this because it's so important, it just puts a lot of pressure on the situation. And try removing the pressure. And so in terms of reading, it's really just playing to her interest areas and building it into everyday life. So having her read, labels in the supermarket, having her read labels around the house, things around the house, labeling things around the house so that she knows, how table looks, how table is spelled, and is able to read it, things like that, to just really incorporate it. Fluency comes with practice. So she might end up having to not do the best. What you can do is drop your email in, and we can send you a copy of the presentation that we did on early reading skills that may provide some insights into helping you do things that might encourage reading with your child.
Okay, thank you very much.
I want to.
When you drop as well, you just put your name beside it. You just put a reason beside it so that when I know what it's for.
I just wanted to quickly say that a lot of times when children might make a fuss about a particular thing, they might be having some sort of difficulty with it. And so it's important that we try to assess or figure out if there's a reason why they are avoiding a task, to see if they need some additional help. So sometimes if kids are crying about math or kids are crying about reading, it's because they need more help with that skill. So we need to figure out what kind of help we need to give them.
All right. Carlene, you can go ahead.
Hi, are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great presentation. Back to the topic of frustration for us as parents. I feel similar to a lot of the parents who commented before that, it's not necessarily what we're expecting our kids to look like when they're doing schoolwork, but just the fact that even when you try the different strategies, so you try to be authoritarian, you find that the child sometimes will shut down. I don't like doing this, and you try to find out why. You prod, you poke, you bribe, you're the best friend 1 minute, and you're judge, jury, and executor the other, because you really do want to know why there is this challenge that your child might be experiencing. But how do we bridge that gap? Because in their mind, we're old, so we don't understand. How do we get them talking without becoming the world's greatest psychologists? How do we get them motivated without being the world's greatest therapists? How do we get there? Because part of the frustration is that we want to be that for them, but we really don't know how to get there.
Okay. All right, so we got asked a similar question in terms of opening up, and it's really important in opening up, oddly enough, to not ask questions because it feels like an interrogation to your kids. So what the angle is to spend a lot of positive time with your kids doing things they want to do so that they become more comfortable with you and in the interaction. And when kids are more comfortable, when things are fun, when they feel safe, not to say that you don't make them feel safe in general, but sometimes it's safe to be here because you know your mother not gonna hurt you, but you don't feel safe to share what's going on in your mind. So when kids feel more safe to share, they might drop a little tidbit, you know, this. And what you want to do is just acknowledge that tidbit, but don't pounce on it because that they might shut down. You really want to allow them the room to say it and just acknowledge it and say, you know, I'm here if you want to talk about it some more, and give them the room to initiate, because when we initiate it, they go on the defensive automatically because they just don't know if you're going to understand, or they don't know how you're going to respond to something. And then in terms of relating that, you know, your persons to and you struggle to is very important so kids can begin to understand that you do understand. As children, we don't often see our parents as people, and we don't often see them as fallible and going through or have been going through a lot of the things that we do. But it really helps to bridge that gap, but also to just know that you're not going to know everything, and provide other social supports for them to have. So if it's like a friend or like one of your friends that they're cool with, maybe they can talk to that person, and you just have an agreement that you won't ask specifically what's going on, but you'll ask if everything is all right so that you know that there's nothing for you to be concerned about, so they feel safe sharing with somebody and you know that you gonna hear something really wrong. Dr. Miller, anything to add? No? Okay. There's Denise, you can go ahead.
All right, thanks for allowing me to share. I appreciated the presentation. As I'm a guidance counselor, and I found some very useful things in it to share with my parents. The question I have for myself is I have a 5-year-old who, from my own estimation, seems to be having difficulty staying still. Granted, at that age, they don't normally stay very still. His pediatrician has said to me, if there is a concern about ADHD or any kind of hyperactivity, it would not be diagnosed until age 6. What I'm trying to understand is how to assist him in learning despite him fidgeting. Homeschooling or virtual schooling is kind of been the best thing for him, because when he was at school, he was his teacher treated him as if he was a big brother, because he was the child who would rush his work and then just run around in the classroom, couldn't sit still for any long period of time. So doing 40 minutes of class and then he's home and he can move about has actually been better for him. But I have the concern with, if there is something that I need to know about how he learns and how best to organize his learning, I would love to know it now. But I'm not sure if I'll get much out of an assessment for him at this point.
Dr. Villa, go ahead.
Okay. Denise, so that's a difficult question. The good thing is that I'm glad that he is that you're finding a way to have him learn at home, because the goal obviously is for our kids to learn. And if it looks different than other children, that's okay, as long as they're learning. So I'm glad that at home right now, he has a little bit more freedom and he's still able to do what he needs to do, but also kind of be okay with being up and down. The question about, it's difficult. I would say that it can be beneficial still to get an assessment if you really think that this is going to be an ongoing challenge for him. and that you might need to figure out ways that he needs to be supported as he goes ahead. I don't think 5 is too young to get an assessment. So you can, I would say you could still initiate that process if you really want to figure out if this is going to be a long-term situation and you need some kind of guidance as to what to do moving forward. For now, he's okay, but what about when he goes back to school? What will that look like, or what kinds of things he will need then? So that's one avenue, but you can also sort of, I mean, as you do your own research and try to figure out, as you observe him, you might for yourself kind of see what things work. And then when he goes back to traditional school, collaborate with the teacher and see if they can put into place some of the things that would allow him to still, you know, move up and down, but still learn, and see how that process goes. So you could choose to initiate an assessment now, and it might be helpful even now, or you can see as you observe what's going on for him, when he goes back into traditional school, talk with the teacher, see if things can be put into place and see how that goes. And then based on that, decide if you want to do an assessment in the future.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Karine, you can go ahead.
When he's actually learning.
We're not hearing you properly. Well, we're not hearing you. I don't know if you can, but if not, you can type in the chat and we'll go through the questions. You with us, Curry? All right. Okay, so there's some questions in the chat that we can't get to right now, but there's some questions where persons ask things specifically or privately to us. We're going to do our best to respond to these questions, just so that you can get some more feedback on what's going on, if we're able to help at the center, or if you need some resources you can maybe look into. Anybody that wants a certificate of attendance, you can drop your email in the chat. Please, 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 if you are logged in as a name that is not your name, or a name that is not the name you registered with, we have no way to contact you. So if you do want a certificate of participation, go ahead and write your email address and your name in the chat so that we can get it to you. Okay. All right. And if your name is what you registered with, there's no problem. We have your contact information for that. We just really want to thank you guys for coming, for participating very much. We appreciated the feedback. We appreciate the discussion, and we appreciate you allowing us to help you through this process. Thank you for being here. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend. Stay safe.